Hey guys, and welcome to Narcissu. This is a free-to-play indie graphic anime novel game that is free on Steam if you want to check it out. I thought I'd give it a go, and we'll go ahead and go from there. Alright, so we've got Narcissu, and there's also there's a second game or something, a second story to it. So we're going to start off with the very first one. Translation. I guess in English? Why not? And we'll have it voiced.
眩しかった日のこと。そんな冬の日のこと。確かに幼い頃から丈夫な方じゃなかった。
Even so, I attended elementary school like all the others, and during summer breaks I often played until I was utterly tanned. June, shortly after my entry into middle school. The day after I ordered a swimsuit for use the next month. My first hospitalization. On a day just before the first semester midterms, and a day when the first drops of rain were so cruelly cold. Following from amidst the pure white of the overcast sky. Of course, the first time it happened, all my classmates came to visit me almost every day. And when I was released, they even came to my house on weekends to play. But that was only the first time around. Autumn into winter, winter into spring, a vicious cycle. Hospitalization, release, clinics, and hospitalization again. And before I knew it, even the classmates I once called friends turned into acquaintances, and then into strangers. As if with every changing of the seasons, I was being erased from their collective memory.
どうやらいい気がしないらしい。普通に生きている人にとって私の存在ってのはだから消されたようだった。いくつもの季節、白い梅雨空を誰とも言葉を交わす必要もなく過ごした。私の英語の教科書は1年生の中間テスト以降まっさらな状態だった。そこで私の時間も止まったらしい。
8 years later, early summer 2004, protagonist. Summer, flowing sweat. The gigantic electronic scoreboard in the driver's license examination facility lit up all at once. My eyes and everyone else's looked for our respective numbers. 237, 237. And some of the 8 columns of lit text. Sure enough, my examination number was shining in the mists. A nearly empty train car, perhaps thanks to the beautiful afternoon. Almost alone in that train car, I was headed back home from the examination hall. My left hand held a new traffic regulations handbook, and my breast pocket held my new driver's license. So now I've got a license as well. I muttered somewhat happily, but there were no strong feelings behind it. I never particularly wanted to drive a car. I never particularly had any motive for it. It was just that my colleagues in the Technical Institute both recommended that I at least get a driver's license. That night, when I told my parents that I'd got my license, they merely replied with an "I see." And when I asked if I could borrow the car, just for a test run, they instantly and curtly said just one thing. No. Well, I didn't want to drive the car or anything, and the response was all too expected. Those were my parents for you. The next day, I woke with chest pain and went to the hospital. Sickness and I generally had nothing to do with one another, which is why I found the ER waiting room to be utterly boring. And just when I thought they were through examining me, they ordered an x-ray and some blood tests. They then left. And again, I was left waiting for a long, long time. I'd already polished off 3 volumes of Shonen Jump and was just about to start on the 4th when they admitted me to the hospital right there and then. And it seemed that my new license, which still lay snugly in my breast pocket, would have to wait a long time for its turn to come. Protagonist, Autumn, 2004. Right around when the all too noisy cicadas had finally gone silent, I once again found myself in the hospital, as per usual. Of course, it wasn't as if I'd been there the entire time. I came and went, a futile cycle. My first surgery was a month before. After that, I started doing the 5-minute commute to and from the hospital but by moped. From then on, I was hospitalized, discharged, ordered to clinic, and hospitalized again and again and again. While I still had no clue what PET or IRESA stood for, in no time, several months had already passed. As my appetite decreased, my medications increased. I could feel my own physical strength trophying away. I kept imagining that my legs were getting thinner. But the needle of the weight scale really informed me. It's not just your imagination. And yet I kept looking at myself with a detached interest. As if it were happening to someone else entirely. As if I were looking at a scene on a TV or the like. My mind could not grasp why so suddenly happened to my body. Nothing within me was telling me that this was real at all. And that's why, even though it was all happening to me, I kept looking on as if it was happening to someone far away. A day of winter, around when the Christmas trees had vanished from the streets. I was discharged home as a kind of a year's end treat. It seemed like an exercise in total transience, but still, it made me slightly happy. I traveled back to a home I had not seen in a long time in the midst of freezing rain. Strangely enough, my entire family was there. My parents, who never so much as talked to me, came out to meet me, if with terrible stilted smiles. And my little sister, whom I never had a pleasant word, had made my favorite cream stew and fried shrimp just for me. They made me sit at the table. They peeled tangerines for me. They were cruelly kind. It was an impressive display. At this point, a little thought occurred to me about my new driver's license, which was still stuffed away in my pocket. That perhaps things would end for the license without it even having known any use. And surrounded by a trio of stilted, strained smiles, I kept that thought as if it was someone else's business, with dispassion, ambiguity, and total disinterest. January 2005. A new year began, and I returned to the hospital. But on this day, instead of my usual 4th floor room, I ended up in a conference room of sorts. They took me there. And then, my father and the doctors had a little talk. I joined in. Well, they talked to me. So this was their so-called announcement. They said it in a terribly roundabout fashion, but they told me that I was going to die. I see. That was my only reply. I had no other words. It was the only thing that left my mouth from beginning to end. And then the doctor's ballpoint pens flew across the paper as in response to my words. Those were probably hospice enrollment procedures, businesslike to the last. My father was the same. So it's this simple. It was the only real thought I had. That day, I was transferred from 4th floor to 7th floor, from a 6-person room to a private room. It was a little different from the other wards, this 7th floor. First of all, the floors were sparkling clean, and second of all, the ceiling was higher than I had ever seen it. The rooms were very nice and had large windows from which the warm daylight streamed as if were by design. But the windows only opened a little. I tested them out, and my head would just barely fit out of one. The color of my ID bracelet had changed as well. The bracelet that I had worn ever since the first hospitalization, the one that had my name and my blood type recorded on it. Its color had now changed from blue to white. A high ceiling, a white vinyl bracelet, a window that would no open more than 15 centimeters. The TV programs celebrating the new year were still playing when I transferred to the 7th floor. And it was at the dawn of that very year that I met her for the first time.
Narukissosu. 冬
Winter
7階
Winter 2005, 7th floor. There was this place, kind of like a lounge, at one side of the corridor, across from the nurse's station. This generally deserted place had a few couches and chairs, as well as a large TV. Stupid programs commemorating the New Year were still being broadcast on that 28-inch screen. And there was a girl who looked absolutely bored watching that absolutely boring TV. Short, in pink pajamas, a white bracelet on her wrist, just like mine. Impressively long hair that almost reached down to her hips. Hey, do you find that interesting? There was no deep purpose in the asking, simply, I had nothing else to do, so I started talking to her.
別に
Was her only reply to me. She didn't turn to face me at all. And she kept looking on with boredom at that TV as if it didn't even exist. Then don't watch it. Even as I thought this, I sat down in a chair next to her. And side by side we watched TV. Nothing else to do. Nothing we could do. So we sat there silently and watched TV. New Year's celebration programs as per usual. A useless array of comedians and oddities. And every so often, the MC's stupid shrill laughter resounding dryly in this white, sun-drenched lounge.
ねえ、あなた
The girl suddenly started talking to me, but her eyes were always glued to the TV screen.
あなた何回目
What do you mean by that?
ここに7階に来たの
Sorry, I have no clue what you're talking about.
そう初めてなんだね
So she's seen my confusion about her question and come to the right conclusion.
じゃあ他に誰もいないし私の役目だから
Duty?
そういうルールなの
Nodding slightly, she explained that the rule was that someone here, 7th floor, should tell newcomers the truth. I knew nothing. I understood even less. And as if I did not even exist, she slowly started her speech.
それじゃあ
Her words spoke methodically one by one. Were a little different from all the ones I'd heard from the doctors about this place. In their business-like crisp syntax, they told me, this is a place where one waits for medical advances. This is a place where one heals one's heart, and perhaps they might have been correct in a general sense. But according to the girl, that was just a party line. The truth was that this 7th floor was the only place in the hospital where medical treatments did not take place. This was just a place where you waited for your life to come to an end. Those were her words to me. I thought so as well. I felt it even before she'd spoken.
私2回目だから
Second time doing what?
ここに来るの
And then she explained to me that nobody on 7th floor stayed here from the initial hospitalization all the way until death. While there was zero possibility of being cured, you were sent home if your condition was stable. But if it worsened again, you would be returned here. The cycle ended only in death. Whether it was at home or here on the 7th floor, always one of the two, you were going to die. No way to escape it, it seemed. And with that meaning permeated her every word, she informed me that this was her second time up here.
じゃあ一度しか言わないからここからは
She continued speaking, all while staring at the blank TV screen. This wasn't idle chit-chat about when lights out was or where the kitchen was or anything like that. This was something completely different. The third time you were discharged home, resign yourself, there won't be a fourth time. You'll never go home again. If you ever want to escape, head towards the B station, not the A station. Eat nothing, that's the simplest shortcut. You leave the smallest burden on your family that way. It was as if she was packed to the brim with matters like those. This was probably an oral tradition, relevant only to those who were going to die, and kept by those who came here for that purpose. So is this the duty that you were talking about?
そうよいつかあなたも初めて来た人には伝えてね
With those words, she slowly stood up. She casually tossed her long hair, and it grazed my nose.
じゃあ、検温の時間だから。
Then she turned her back, and she started walking down the corridor. Now completely deserted save for me, the lounge held only the laughter from the TV and the white flowers by the windowsill. In the end, she didn't even look at me once. A few days later, New Year's celebrations were over, and the middle and high school students were beginning a new term. And just as ever, she and I sat in this lounge, staring blankly at the TV. This is boring.
そうね。
So we said, but we both kept our eyes on the screen. Hey, is this the place always this way?
質問の意味がわからない。
I'm getting at how it's always deserted. Other than the nurses, doctors, and help staff, and other than her, I'd not seen a single person. Did everybody go home for the New Year's or something?
その理由を知りたいの？
Well, I didn't mean...
じゃあ言わない。
We, who disinterestedly tossed back and forth this exchange that couldn't even be called a conversation. The slight breeze coming from the window that would not open more than 15 centimeters. From time to time, her hair would sway, as if the agreement the flowers at the windowsill would too. This was how we killed time each day after day, staring at that boring good-for-nothing TV. Oh, here you two of you are, an elderly nurse said as she rushed toward us. From what I'd seen of the nurse's station, she was apparently the charge nurse of the 7th floor. Well, Miss Setsumi, any fever?
大丈夫。出てない。
Setsumi? So that was her name. You really shouldn't be moving around like this. Do you understand? Everyone's worried about you.
別にいいよ。
Come now, what kind of answer is that? Oh, children these days. The nurse continued to scold and henpeck for some while longer. And then the girl named Setsumi, just pretended not to notice it at all. She simply stared straight forward at that boring TV, paying that fussy nurse as little heed as she could. I'll be coming back later to draw some blood. Okay? With those words, the charge nurse went back to the nurse's station. Hey, you know... Well, mind if I call you Setsumi? I asked this as I stared at her white vinyl ID bracelet, and at the blood type and the name written therein. Is something the matter, Setsumi?
どうして呼び捨てなの？
Why are you calling me that? Huh?
年下のくせに。
You're younger than me. Hey, why am I younger than you?
別に。
Nothing.
そう思っただけ。
It wasn't that I was offended that she called me younger than her. It was just that no matter how I looked at it, I thought I was 5 or 6 older than she was. That's why I took out my driver's license from my breast pocket and handed it directly to her. See, I may not seem it, but I'm 20.
やっぱり年下よ。
So you're younger after all. She only took a glance at my license before handing it back to me. I really don't get what you're saying.
どうでもいいじゃない。少し上なだけよ。
She murmured, unexpressionlessly as ever. Her eyes were fixed on that boring TV, all right. But it also felt as she was gazing at something far away. After they'd taken my AM vital signs, I snuck past the nurses and boarded the elevator. When I got to the first floor, I walked out of the outpatient clinic's door and walked outside of the hospital. My goal was the place that had been told not long ago, the faraway B station, not the nearby A station. It wasn't that I wanted to escape or anything. At 7th floor or at home, none of us died anywhere else. That's what I'd been told. And this B station, which this girl named Setsumi had apparently been to many times. That's why, at least just once, I wanted to see this place with my own eyes. It's not as if we were going to be a guard on duty. Even so, we were inhabitants of the 7th floor, different from other inpatients. And thinking of vague maybes, so early in the morning, I headed towards that station. My legs settled into a lazy gait as I glanced sidelong at the people commuting to work or school. After about 25 minutes of this, I arrived in front of the station. Roughly 4 bus stops away when I calculated it out. Wow, there are a lot of people here. It was my first impression of the B station. I stood out a bit because I was in pajamas. But I felt if I could just buy a subway ticket, I'd be able to go anywhere, no question about it. Still had no idea why I had been gone to the B station, not the A station. But it looks as if it would be easy to escape if I really wanted to. She must have come here many times herself, so why did she remain on the 7th floor right now? The station in the early AM. I stood there, thinking these thoughts, as I watched the people rapidly passing me by. That night, after lights out, bored of manga and unable to sleep, I wandered through the hospital alone. Certainly it was supposed to be allowed after lights out, but we of 7th floor had a particular kind of liberty. So in the presence of no light, in the pitch-black stillness of the lounge, that was where I found her. Hey, have you been looking outside today? The darkened interior, she did answer me, but she continued to stare out the window as if she had not. I immediately launched into what happened today. Oh, by the way, I went out to the station today. The B station, just as you taught me.
So.
But her response did not change. I thought that she'd react with something, but she'd been there before too. But now that I thought about it, did the fact she was here mean that she had no intention of escaping in the first place?
私
What? She opened her mouth abruptly, and spoke as if she'd seen right through me.
でも次で3回目だからもう会えないかもね。
Yeah, I guess. Probably what she was talking was a temporary discharge from the hospital. She told me that nobody was discharged from 7th floor more than 3 times. Unlike the elderly, given the progress of her diseases, this meant all the more to young people like us. Her "we may not see each other again" was filled with that kind of meaning.
ね、あなたはどちらを選ぶの？
Decided on?
どっちで死ぬつもりってこと？
When that word death came up abruptly, I was at a total loss for words. I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet.
そう。まだ1回目だもんね。
She murmured, looking desolate. Certainly, it wasn't as if I was going to exist here forever. Just like everyone else, I would be admitted and discharged, slowly growing weak, and someday, I would have to choose in the end, here on 7th floor, or at home surrounded by those fake smiles.
私は家は嫌。だけどここも嫌。
Then what will you do?
別にどうもしない。自力で歩けるうちにどこかに行くだけ。
Somewhere, you can't be. This girl who was staying here on the 7th floor, when she could have escaped at any time she wanted. When I thought of that, do you have any other place to go?
あなた、私を引き止めたいの？
What?
それとも一緒についてきたいの？
Well, no, that wasn't what I was thinking about.
じゃあ聞かないで。
She was staring out the window as she spoke, dispassionate, not looking at me once, the same as ever. But then, and just then, her usual expressionless face looked very sad to me. I was a newcomer to the 7th floor, just recently taught that the 3rd discharge was the last, and she was a girl who was soon to be discharged for the 2nd time. I still did not feel anything real about what was happening to me. But would I, too, come to wear such a face someday? The rain at morning twilight. Sometimes sleet, sometimes snow, always coming down. And I was sitting there watching TV in my usual place. 7th floor felt as devoid of people as it always had.
面白い。
No, completely boring. She walked to my side. Saying no more, she sat down in a chair next to me. And that was how we began watching TV on this very day as well. She was probably in the same boat as me. Nothing else to do, nothing we could do. I'd never seen her respond to the TV before. Is something the matter?
別に。
Those were her usual words, but her response was anything but usual. And I looked at the screen, interested in anything that could move her so. There was nature scenes being displayed on TV, beautiful hills and dales with trees and flowers. And a vast spread of white flowers in the midst. I remember those flowers from somewhere. They looked very similar to the white flowers that decorated the windowsills. Could those be the same flowers? You know, the same as those over there? I pointed to the flowers by the windows as I said this.
違う。
Huh? Really?
種類は同じだけど、厳密に言えば違う。
She glanced at the flowers by the window for a second, and then went back to gazing at the TV. She told me that they were different, but I couldn't see the distinction between the two. And it meant nothing to me whether the flowers were the same or not. But what did mean something was this girl who usually said not a word more than she needed to. She was conversing in rare form today, which was why I decided to follow along. Do you happen to know a lot about them? Flowers, that is.
別に。
Really? But I don't see the difference. The flowers on the screen and the flowers in the vase to her side. I continued to talk as I stared vacantly at the two. Look, are those orchids or lilies? See, they're pure white, right? I had no interest, yet I kept trying to make conversation. But she resumed her silence soon enough. And with her usual lack of expression, she continued staring at that boring TV screen. And just when I turned back to the TV, resigned to the fact that I get nothing more out of her.
ナルキッソス。
What?
ナルキッソスよ。
As she answered, she turned to face me for the first time. Her hip-length hair swaying, she pointed at the TV screen and looked at me. The ID bracelet on her wrist was white. Her skin was white, just like the flowers on screen. And I swore I could see a tiny smile. And that face that was looking at me for the first time. Alrighty, well, that was the prologue of Narcissu. I'm really enjoying this, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it as well. I'm going to probably do each chapter as we go, and hopefully it'll be pretty good. So I'll see you guys in the next chapter. Thanks for watching, guys.